Hello everybody and welcome to a new series where I'm going to be trying to go over Stellaris as a whole, but in bite-sized chunks. And depending on how well received, maybe we'll actually finish everything in the game. Who knows? I'm sure everything will get patched and changed by the time I'm anywhere near every system in the game. But yeah, today I want to go over weapon systems. And as you can see, I have a basic little Corvette here outfitted with 3 basic weapons. And I kind of just want to tell you, why or why not you would want to choose these systems. First, we have the small red lasers, then we have the small nuclear missiles, and then the small mass drivers. Essentially, red lasers, and just lasers in general, aren't something that I would recommend. And there's a couple reasons. The first reason is, if you look at the range, 30 for the lasers, and then versus the range on the missiles and mass drivers, it is shorter. Obviously, the missiles have a much larger range than both, but even the mass driver has an edge on the lasers. So you're not going to get your opening volley before the other person, ever. It's just not going to happen. Which means that you're going to be under fire longer, which means that your ships are going to take more damage. The second reason that I don't really like the lasers is that you are going to get a negative 20% reduction on any shield damage. And shields, although you don't start with shields, you get them very early. So this negative 20 shield damage means that you're going to be in combat even longer as a result. And just generally, you lose engagements using lasers. The 50% armor ignoring is okay, but it really doesn't matter that much from what I've seen. Especially since shields are usually preferred over armor in most cases. Then you have your mass drivers and your nuclear missiles, which can sort of be interchanged in the beginning of the game, but towards the late game it switches over to mass drivers for reasons I'll explain in a minute. Let's go over why missiles are okay in the beginning at least. First of all, they have great tracking and great accuracy compared to the mass drivers here. They also have almost double the range, whereas 45 to 70, maybe not double, but they have quite a bit more range, like 30% more. And then you also have 15% shield damage, which is good. Not quite as good as the 33% shield damage that you get out of this. So, the nuclear missiles are great in the beginning, because you have the long range, you can engage from far away, shoot off a few missiles, and then jump out of that engagement, and you kind of use hit and run tactics, which work well. The problem with missiles is that as soon as point defense starts becoming a thing, and especially once like flak batteries come into play, missiles get shot down more often than they hit, and you lose a lot of your damage. Even though it says average damage 2.9%, you can expect maybe half of that at best. So, missiles are okay in the beginning, but again, once that point defense and flak cannons and, fighter wings show up, you're not looking at good odds for your missiles landing. Finally, you have your mass drivers here, and they do not suffer from the same stigma as the missiles. They can't get shot down. If they are going to hit, they hit, and they get 33% shield damage, which is great, especially against early shields. So, in general, even though they might not be as accurate, might not shoot as far, and might not have the same tracking, you're going to be able to win engagements more often. So yeah, that's the basic 3, and then I'm going to change this out, and I'm going to show you some edge cases. Okay, so as you can see, I have a battleship here, and I have put on 2 special weapons here. We have whirlwind missiles, which also come as swarm missiles, the level 1s. And then we have kinetic artillery. The whirlwind missiles are special compared to other missiles in one specific reason, or one specific case, in that if you look at the missile subtext in their little context dialog box, you see the evasion 200%. Now that's important because evasion means that obviously the missiles are going to evade any sort of point defense trying to shoot them down. And as far as I can tell, you cannot get 200% tracking, which is the direct mitigation for evasion, to shoot these down. So whirlwind and swarmer missiles will both be able to hit almost all the time. And they have decent range, but they're also locked to this medium-sized slot. You cannot get a large and you cannot get a small. So still probably not the best, but if you have them in a stage of the game where medium slots are pretty good, then maybe you want to use them. Finally, there's the kinetic artillery, and I'm actually going to pick up these Marauder missiles just to prove my point here. They have great range, 100 range. Not quite as much as the Marauder missiles, 110 here, But again, you've heard my piece on why missiles are not that great, especially, against well-equipped fleets. The thing about the kinetic artillery, though, is that their tracking and accuracy aren't that great. Tracking is very low, and accuracy is mediocre at best. But the thing is, you're not using kinetic artillery to actually shoot at small ships that are going to have evasion. What you're using kinetic artillery to do is to shoot at space stations, battleships, and cruisers, basically. And it does a ton of damage for what its role is. So, kinetic artillery, great. I definitely recommend using it when you have large slot ships. Just in the fact that you can deal a ton of damage from a long range and basically get an edge on the engagement before it's even started for the enemy. Next up, we have a few special weapons that fit into the standard slots, not these extra larges here. So first we have our phase disruptors, which I like to use these in slots that I'm not already using for anything else. Essentially, the 200% shield damage makes them very useful against shields, obviously. And if you're going to use them, I actually kind of recommend pairing them with the plasma cannons. And the reason for that is obviously the plasma cannons ignore 90% of armor. So you use your phase disruptors to take down their shields, and then once their shields are taken care of, the plasma cannons ignore most of the armor and do a bunch of hull damage. There's also these stormfire cannons. They're another form of kinetic. I don't really use them much, but they can be useful situationally, I guess. I just don't really recommend them. They're not that great. Finally, there's flak artillery. Flak artillery is similar to point defense, which I should probably load up here, in that it shoots at missiles and I think strike craft, which go in the hangar slots. So flak artillery basically is the same as point defense. It shoots at missiles, makes them go away before they actually hit anything. The only difference is that flak artillery is just kind of better in, I think, almost every way. They have slightly less accuracy, but otherwise they're better. They have more tracking, they have higher range, and I think they do more damage. Yeah, they do almost double the damage. So if you don't have flak artillery, go ahead and throw point defense on there to protect yourself against missiles, or use your, I think it's fighters. Fighters can shoot at other missiles. Otherwise, throw on the flak artillery. Since I have this open, we might as well go over these. There are fighters and bombers that can fit in your hangars. Hangars are exclusive to battleships and cruisers. And essentially, the only difference between the fighter and the bomber is that the bomber does more damage, but it also won't shoot missiles and things like that. But the fighter shoots missiles and things like that and doesn't do damage. Do that much damage, at least. Both useful situationally. Ideally, I mean, you probably won't use them, but who doesn't like a carrier? Come on. One more special missile system that we need to go over is torpedoes. Torpedoes are essentially missiles, but specialized, and generally what they specialize at is affecting shields in particular ways. So if you look at the neutron torpedoes, they're, average damage and all that, range, and, they have pretty terrible tracking. But they get 200% shield damage. So if you're trying to take out something's shields, neutron torpedoes are actually a great way to do it, if you can get through their point defense. The other torpedo that you want to look at are the Devastators here, and they have iterations and whatnot, but the Devastators, again, terrible tracking, decent range and damage, but they ignore 50% of armor and have 100% shield penetration, so they just completely ignore the shields in the first place. So essentially, the torpedoes are great against shields if you can get through point defense. And if you look at the damage here, the large missile versus the medium missile, the torpedoes tend to fit somewhere in between. Finally, let's talk about the extra large slot. This is a slot where there are 3 weapon types. I think these are both energy. Let's see here, energy, yeah, and then this is kinetic. There are the Tachyon Lances. I don't really ever recommend using these. They're okay if you don't have anything else to put into the extra large slot, but essentially they're not that great. They ignore 90% of armor, but they also lose 33% of their damage against shields. They have good range, and they have terrible tracking, they have good accuracy, and they shoot fairly often, 24 damage per second. There's also the focused arc emitters, which I generally equip my ships with. 100% accuracy, 100% tracking, slightly better range with 110 here. They do less damage per second, but they also ignore 100% of armor and 100% of shields. So all the damage that does hit the target goes straight to the shield, or the hull, sorry. And then after the focused arc emitters, we have cannons here. They're basically just larger kinetics, larger than the whatever those large slot ones were. And these ignore 50% of armor, they do an extra 33% shield damage, and they have the longest range of all three of the large slots at 120. They don't have great tracking, and they have good accuracy. So again, just like the large slot kinetics, they're not meant to shoot little ships. They're meant to, destroy other battleships, space stations, things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for weapon systems. If I missed anything, please feel free to let me know. And I hope this was very informative and or useful to people. And I'll see you in the next one. So again, thanks for watching. See you later.